Welcome to the Exploring Neurodiversity podcast for adults who support neurodivergent children. Whether you're an allied health professional, medical professional, education professional, or a parent of a neurodivergent child, you are welcome here. This podcast is recorded on the Aboriginal lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people. I acknowledge the traditional owners, elders past and present, and I extend my acknowledgement to any Aboriginal and First Nations people listening in. I'm Adina from Play, Learn, Chat. I'm an autistic ADHD speech therapist, professional educator, speaker, and I also support neurodivergent business owners in my other business, Neurodivergent Business Coaching and Consulting. I'm obsessed with creating a world where neurodivergent people are understood, embraced, supported, and celebrated. A world where we neurodivergent people can understand ourselves and thrive in a life aligned with our individual strengths, wants, and needs. On the Exploring Neurodiversity podcast, you'll get my perspectives and conversations with my neurodivergent friends, all about how adults can best support neurodivergent children in our lives. I bring a neurodiversity affirming approach and indeed a human affirming approach to the support that we all provide for neurodivergent kids in our lives. Let's dive in. Hello, Cheri. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm very excited to have you here because what we're going to talk about today is so important for therapists, parents, professionals, humans to understand for ourselves, for the kids we support. I always dive too far deep, but who are you? What do you do? Let's work this out first. I'm just excited.
So I'm Cheri. I'm an OT, qualified occupational therapist. I work for myself running my own business, which is Learn and Grow Occupational Therapy. And I'm based in Geelong, Victoria. But yeah, I spend my time supporting kids and families and other OTs out in the world. So I love educating people, supporting people, building those authentic connections, and talking a lot about regulation.
Which is what we're chatting about today. I think by the end of it, we're all going to be much clearer about what regulation actually is and what can we do about it.
I hope so. That's the point. I hope so.
Yes. And I know we're talking about co-regulation as well. These are terms that might be familiar to a lot of people, and I don't know that I could define them very well, but I think I've got a pretty okay idea, but I can't wait to hear from a neurodivergent OT who just thinks about this stuff, writes about this stuff all the time, teaches about it. I can't wait. So thank you for being here to join in.
Thank you. It's exciting being here. My first podcast.
Yes. And yeah, first of many. I'm just going to go out and say it. If anyone else has a podcast and you're listening in and you want to chat with Cheri, just do go because she's lovely. That's all I've got to say to you now. But stay and listen. So let's kick off with who you are, like a little deeper version than the bio. Can you tell us a bit about how you view neurodivergence in your own life, in yourself, and anything about your journey that you want to share about your neurodivergent brain and self?
Absolutely. So I am a late diagnosed autistic and ADHD. Certainly the last couple of years, I think. I actually can't remember. Time flies. And once I kind of explored that and what it meant to me, so many things just seemed to click in place or make sense. And I felt like I could definitely understand myself much better. Especially looking back on my childhood and kind of reflecting on it. I was like, that's why there were certain situations or things that were hard that I never necessarily voiced, but were hard. And I was misdiagnosed as a kid with separation and social anxiety, which I think was actually because of my ND brain not coping with changes and new things rather than social anxiety.
I mean, that sounds kind of like an autistic kid often, doesn't it?
Especially girls.
Yeah.
Social anxiety is quite often misdiagnosed and, also told that I had like stomach migraines and stuff like that, which I don't think that was the case. I think it was just a physical manifestation of not coping with this situation right now. And I masked a lot as a kid. So I was very much follow the rules, because I didn't know what to do outside of those rules. I didn't understand. I didn't know how to act. I needed those rules to fit in. So very high mask. I still am highly mask. But I am super grateful for having my neurodivergent brain. and mostly because it allows me to connect with the kids I work with on such a deeper level. Um, and it's just beautiful. It just comes so naturally. Just so many shared experiences that I have with the kids. And many of my special interests are quite like a lot of stuff I have in common with the kids as well.
Tell us about your special interests, whether they're like current, past, stable, static, changing, whatever.
Yeah, so I've got one at the moment, which is a newer one, and I absolutely love it, which is Moana 2. I reckon I've watched it every day since it came out on Disney Plus.
Awesome. So I am so glad that I did my homework unknowingly because I watched it finally for the first time yesterday. And we'd actually listened to the soundtrack a lot because my daughter and I, we love Moana 1. But it took her a while to feel ready to watch Moana 2. And in fact, I was ready first. So I started watching it and then she got up and kept watching with me.
The soundtrack is so good. I love the soundtrack. Disney in general, I just love Disney in general. I mean, I have the same maybe like 5 or 6 movies that I have just on rotation.
Please share. With no judgment.
I'm not gonna list them off. So I've got some like, I suppose, I call them newer or more like modern Disney. So like Encanto, Tangled, Moana 1, Princess and the Frog, and then I've got some like older Disney favorites like the Goofy movie, The Emperor's New Groove. But yeah, Disney is just constantly on rotation in my house.
I love that. It's such a safe thing when you have, whether it's Disney or another show. I know for so many of us autistic folks, it's such a safe comfort thing to just have it there in the background. It's like, I don't know, for me, it feels like a coming home or a coming back to my people or something like that.
Yeah, it's like really, there's just something about it. I think it's familiarity as well. Just like that sense of, you know what's going to happen. It's, very comforting.
Yeah. And I will say there's an extension for me, and this is probably a whole other podcast, but there's an extension for me, which is like when there's a remake, I get really nervous. So one of my number one Disney film is Beauty and the Beast, and probably because it came out at my most impressionable age, or like I had it on VHS and watched it probably every day around the ages of 7 to 10, something like that. And I can recite the whole thing pretty much. If you give me a line, I can just keep going. Of the original. I'm talking like, the Disney original, the 90s one.
Yes,
When the remake came out, like I've seen it once and it was good, but it's not the same. And they changed a few things and it was different. And I feel really uncomfortable and I don't have any inclination to watch it more than once.
Yeah, no, I get that. And like one thing that does irritate me a little bit is they've changed the animation in recent years, in like the last maybe like 10 to 15 years. So if you go back and like watch, I think the last kind of one that was done in the old school animation was The Princess and the Frog.
Like the hand drawn? Do you mean?
Yeah, just like the way it looks. So a lot of it now is more like 3DS kind of thing. And I
Gotcha.
like old school stuff. Like my like creative art side of me is like, why did you change something that was good?
And that was stable for such a long time. Like we were watching Alice in Wonderland maybe a month or two ago, and that is from the 40s, maybe. Like it could also have been made 20, 30, 40 years later, and it would have looked quite similar. It's interesting. That is interesting. Maybe we actually need to do a whole Disney deep dive episode, I'm thinking. And
I actually did a string of posts and email in January about neurodivergence in Disney movies.
It's brilliant. I'm going to link to some of it in the show notes because they were awesome.
Yeah. It was fun. It was fun doing that. And like I had a lot of parents be like, "Oh, I never viewed that character as like, being neurodivergent." I'm like, "Oh, I think they are."
Yeah. Do you have one character that you identify with?
Mirabelle from Encanto, hands down.
Oh, one?
Like she's the youngest of 3 girls. I'm the youngest of 3 girls. Just how much she highly values family, which is something I strongly resonate with. And just that, masking, people pleasing, all stuff that I do and have done growing up. And she's very crafty like me as well. She does a lot of sewing and whatnot. So yeah.
I love that so much. I see it. I see it in you. I see it in her. I think it's beautiful. And I think, there's so much to be said about the neurodivergence of the characters in Encanto. You have said some of it. I feel like with Mirabelle, it's this idea, it's like she was late to finding out her special thing. And that can be so often the experience of us late diagnosed folk. Do you feel that you're there? Because I see it from the outside. I see your special thing.
Yes, yeah, I definitely now I do, but growing up, it was definitely not the case growing up. I think because I'm so much more thoughtful now as an adult as well. So, you know, I'm not surprised me as a kid or other kids now don't say it.
Yeah.
It's okay. They don't have the same brain as you do as an adult.
Yes. Although I then think about all the kids who are now getting identified or diagnosed much earlier. And, maybe they, let's say on paper, look similar to us, but we found out, decades later in our own timeline. I'm so hopeful for them that they get this self-knowledge, this self-confidence, this community much earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that I'm the role model of that. Like going to these kids and being like, hey, that's me too. I'm successful. I, got all this stuff going for me. Life can be great when you're an adult. I know it's hard now, but this is what it can look like. There's so many opportunities now.
I love it. That's such a beautiful thing to model. And you model that you can still love Disney. You don't have to let that go. Stunning. Actually, oh my gosh, I'm just holding up because we're on camera. You could watch this on YouTube. I got a little Christmas tree ornament from Beauty and the Beast.
So cute.
And my daughter tried to claim it, and I just went, I gave her a different one, and I just said, absolutely not. No. But anyway, so that is cool. We definitely need to talk more Disney. Stay tuned another day maybe. But we should also talk about your professional knowledge, and I have no doubt that this intersects with your personal explorations as well. Let's talk about regulation. So regulation, talking about our bodies and our minds. What does it mean? How I would define it really not very well. So over to you.
Yeah, so it is kind of a tricky one to define because it's so heavily based on people's personal experiences. But like in general, regulation is a broad term anyway. Essentially, it's kind of used to describe the set of skills that we have that allow us to be in tune with our mind, our body, and the environment, like what's around us as well, outside of ourselves, which includes other people. And so that's like a really complex relationship, when you think about it. And regulation can be anything from like our energy levels to our emotions to our bodily needs. So like, if we're hungry or thirsty, our relationship to sensory experiences, the list goes on. And it's definitely not as straightforward as what I think a lot of people think it is. It's very multi-layered and very individual experiences, and the way you target it, not one shoe fits everyone.
So what do you think? What do we get wrong? I say we, I'm using that very broadly. So whether it's professionals who support kids, whether it's people in the community. I know there's a lot of parents of neurodivergent kids who listen as well. Probably more professionals, and a lot of us wear multiple hats too. What do we often get wrong? What are the misunderstandings about regulation?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has led to it is a lot of misinformation. So a lot of words getting used interchangeably and getting misused. So, a lot of people don't actually understand what it means. And so I actually had to go and do a lot of my own research to really figure out and clarify, okay, well, what is all these different terms? What do they all mean? What's the relationship between them all? And there's three in particular that I hear a lot and that get misused a lot. And that's self-regulation, emotional regulation, and sensory regulation. So they're actually all different. They are not the same. And so a lot of like programs or information, like blogs or websites or whatever, you'll be reading it and they'll be talking about emotional regulation, and then it will start talking about self-regulation, and then it will jump to sensory regulation, sometimes with the same meaning without actually telling you it actually means something different. We're actually referring to something different now.
I'm going to have to go back and check all of my stuff and think whether I have got it right. And you are also always, always welcome to call me out if I've muddled them up or not been clear enough. How interesting. Please keep going. I'm just going,
And
oh,
I'm sure what I'm about to explain to you, you'll be like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna be using these terms correctly from now on."
that's the hope. So
Yeah.
let's fix
So
this.
so I'm going to kind of define and clarify those 3 for you. So when we talk about regulation and the development of regulation, our absolute end goal is self-regulation. And so that's just the ability to be regulated. So regulated could be like we feel comfortable or we can do the things that we need to do. So that might be schoolwork or that might be able to sit at the table to eat, whatever that task is. And that means being regulated despite sensory experiences we may be having, despite what's happening in the environment. So noises or people talking to you, despite who else is involved, despite what's happening in our bodies, like if we're hungry, if we need to go to the toilet, and despite the emotions we may be feeling. It's a lot. It's a lot to process all at one time.
And I'm going to just have a guess and say that for neurotypical folks, more often than not, regulation is kind of there. It's there and available because all those pieces you talked about, the sensory, the emotional, everything else, just doesn't, I like the term I say flap, doesn't flap them as much as it does for us. Am I on base?
And I think, like I was saying before, it's such an individual and unique experience, regulation. I think regulation doesn't ever actually finish developing. I mean, we as adults, we're constantly faced with challenges and finding new ways to regulate ourselves. Some tools and strategies don't always work forever, and we have to switch it up. Um, and I'll chat more about a bit later on about the part of the brain and actual formal development. But for us to have sound development and self-regulation, so to be regulated with all of this stuff going on, it assumes that we also have developed our skills in the areas or all the other areas of regulation. And so other areas of regulation can include sensory regulation, emotional regulation, cognitive regulation, behavioral regulation, social regulation. All of this is going on. And all of this makes up self-regulation. So self-regulation is on top, and all these other bits and pieces, all the other types of regulation come under it.
It is actually much, much, much bigger than I realized.
It's huge. It's huge. And so, yeah, they're all different. They all have a role to play, but they're also very, very intrinsically linked in with each other. So it's very unlikely that one area is going to be like you have challenges in one area, you've probably got challenges in all the areas of regulation. And if something happens in one area, say sensory, like sensory regulation, you're probably going to start seeing this domino effect and it's going to affect all the other areas of regulation. So like if we're dysregulated because there's too much sensory information, it means that we're not going to be able to or it might bring on a certain feeling like anxiety, or it might bring on a feeling of overwhelmed. So that's your emotional regulation.
There's one I feel, it always comes up when I think about this sort of thing. Garbage trucks, like noisy garbage trucks going past outside, especially when I'm trying to work or record something or think, but even just a noisy garbage truck on a baseline of nothing else, it makes me angry. And loud motorbikes, like when people have made their motorbike or their car like extra loud on purpose and then they go fanging past, and like it's not just like a fright or something, or it's like it's actual deep anger.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that is something happening in your sensory world, your sensory regulation, that's tipping off your emotional regulation. And before you said, when I was trying to concentrate when a garbage truck comes along, that's cognitive regulation.
Yeah. So that's a whole new layer to throw it all off.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the terms do get misconstrued, and particularly the 3 that I mentioned before. So self-reg, sensory, and emotional reg, but they're all different. And so I already kind of described a little bit about self-regulation, that it's just it's almost like its own umbrella term with all this stuff underneath it. But I'm going to clarify the other 2 for you as well. So emotional regulation is when we manage our emotions, our feelings, And despite those feelings or emotions, we can still do the tasks that we need to do in our day-to-day life. So when you're angry with like the garbage truck, for example, you're able to work through that and continue working. So that's emotional regulation. And so for kids and like adults, some of those skills that come with emotional regulation could be being able to identify how you feel, how or when you respond to that emotion, using any like tools or strategies to cope with it, as well as being able to continue whatever it is that you need to do in that moment. So the task at hand. Does that make sense? Emotional regulation.
It really does. And I guess this stuff is easy for me to get, partly because professionally I talk about it and interact with it on, I hope, a clear enough way, nowhere near as clear as you've just defined for me. And I experience it very deeply, and I've supported people in it as well. But I guess I want to invite people listening that if you're kind of hearing it and it sounds maybe academic and you're not really getting it or feeling it, I almost want to invite everyone to try and figure out your own experience. It might not be as extreme as mine getting so angry at loud motorbikes, but I feel like even neurotypical folks are going to have these moments or these experiences where the regulation in one area is impacting on another area. Do you think, is that fair to say? We're all human, right?
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. It's something that we experience every day.
Hmm.
It is regulation is constant. It is constantly there. Yeah, and kind of focusing on one specific example can be really good to break down and reflect. Okay, what's happening in that moment for me?
Yeah.
And so like the last one that I haven't really explained much is sensory regulation.
Yes.
So, and that's specifically relating to sensory experiences, and they can be internal or external. So internal could be like our bodily needs, like what's happening inside our bodies. Are we hungry, thirsty, hot, cold, pain, sick? So that's kind of interoception stuff that it goes into. Interoceptions are linked to sensory regulation. And then there's external. So obviously the sensory experiences outside our body. So how bright it is or how loud it is, those types of things. So for example, for a kid trying to regulate in terms of like for sensory regulation, it might could look like, well, they're having to do their schoolwork. So they need cognitive regulation to do that. They need to be able to focus despite everything else. But in terms of the sensory things that might be happening is they need to be able to cope with how noisy the classroom is, or how bright the sun is shining in on their face while they're trying to do their schoolwork. They might be hungry, their stomach might be grumbling. They might have woolen jumpers and it's really itchy, and they are sitting there thinking about all these things. The bright sun, the noisy class, the itchy clothes.
And then they got rained on in the morning, and then they had the wet, sticky clothes. That happened a few weeks ago. It was like right at drop-off time. It was like this bucketing down, and I was soggy and feeling really off. So I just went home and got changed because I could.
Yeah.
Kids can't.
No, they can't. And so when we've got all of that going on, and yet we're expecting them to sit there and write a page of writing, not going to happen.
When also that is maybe already hard for them on 4 levels, 5 levels, and the emotional, cognitive, the self-judgment, and then the sticky dress.
Yeah, that's one of my icks. Wet clothes.
Yeah, we're icking on that together. And even, I mean, I didn't even think how connected that was to our conversation today. But as we got on, if anyone's watching the video, you can see the lighting I've got is very dim. So there's just like a kind of floor lamp behind me and then some little fairy lights going on. Because I had to turn the fluoro light off because my brain just went, we are done with that big light today. But I have the self-knowledge, the self-advocacy, the control over my environment to be able to do those things. And I shed self-judgment long ago, mostly. So I can just go, I could just turn the light off. I don't need to have that on. Like, these are the pieces that kids, humans, anyone is still working on developing, right? Like, what's that? What's the trajectory? What are we expecting? Or maybe what I'm hoping you'll clarify is, are we often expecting too much of kids around this regulation piece?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so to kind of, I suppose it goes into more like regulation development and brain development, because that's regulation is a part of our brain and nervous system. That's where it comes from. And so to kind of understand better that what we're asking kids to do is unrealistic for any child, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical, that it's unrealistic. You need to understand the brain. And so I'm going to give a bit of a spiel about the brain, parts of the brain in regulation and some of its development. And I do apologize, and I've tried to make it as simple as I can so that listeners can understand. But it's kind of following along with a couple of other frameworks that are already out there to explain the brain. So like I think it's the triune brain model. Probably butchered that name, but that's how I pronounce it. Or like flipping your lid example. It kind of follows along with those frameworks for how the brain works. So they describe 3 main parts of the brain that play a role in regulation. And so these 3 parts of the brain will switch on during different times and during different levels of stress or different levels of regulation. So when we're regulated, we're able to do what we need to do in the moment. So whether that's school or work, we can attend to tasks, we can cope with whatever's going on inside and outside of our body. And so the part of the brain that's responsible for that is the front part of our brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, or the thinking brain, just to keep it simple. It does all the thinking. It does all the complex problem solving and attention and judgment and everything. And so unsurprisingly, because it's responsible for so much, it actually doesn't stop developing until our mid-20s. So when, I have a lot of families, they want to work on attention or they want to work on regulation, a lot of times they have to reframe their thinking because 6-year-old's brain is not fully developed. It's not yet ready to self-regulate for another 20 years.
I have a feeling there's something around related to that executive functioning prefrontal cortex development that says until your mid-20s, there are like regulation skills and planning and decision making and emotional regulation too, that isn't going to be available until that development's complete, if it ever does get completed.
Yeah. And I wonder too if that's why in America they get their licenses later. Do they get it later or earlier?
I don't know. Would Americans be like more logical in their rule making around driving? They just get to drink alcohol later legally.
When you look at the stats for red P platers and green P platers,
Yes.
huge difference because that brain development from late teens, like, 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Into more towards our, early to mid-20s is different.
And I'm going to just guess, complete guesswork here, but if you then looked at the stats of like people who first get their license at age 17 compared to people who first get their license at age 25, you're still going to see much better outcomes, probably for those getting the license later on. Probably. I'm just making that up.
Probably assumes.
You brought it back to the 6-year-old. It's like, why on earth would we expect the 6-year-old to have these abilities to self-regulate if a 26-year-old is barely there? Or maybe a 39-and-a-half-year-old. Yeah.
Exactly. I was like what I was saying before, like, I don't think regulation ever stops developing because the world changes around us and we have to change with it as much as we can try. So that's the front part of our brain. It's the biggest part of our brain that does all the hard stuff. We're now going to move down the brain and down and in to the part that's responsible for emotions and memory. And this is the limbic system or the emotion brain. And the limbic system is actually made up of several different other parts, but I'm not going to go into details or explain them. Maybe at a different time and place, but I think for now we don't really have to. So when a child or anyone is dysregulated or becoming dysregulated, the front part of the brain, so the thinking brain, switches off and the limbic system takes control. It takes over. And like this is when we start to see kids start to get emotional. They seem unreasonable. They're screaming. They're yelling. They are doing this for one of 2 reasons, or a person. It doesn't have to be a child, but a person is doing it for one of 2 reasons. One is that our thinking brain isn't working. It's switched off. So it's not going to be able to problem solve. That part of the brain is gone. They can't answer questions. They can't problem solve. And 2, because of this, The emotion brain is in control. So the responses and behavior you'll see will be based on emotions. It will be based on anger, fear, or even good feelings, like when they're excited. Like some kids, you can't calm down because they're so excited, they're elated. And so that's what's happening when the emotion brain is in control. So that's when we're dysregulated. But when we see very challenging behaviors or really extreme moments of dysregulation, it's more not so much dysregulation, but it's more being distressed. And it's different to being dysregulated because when we're distressed, our mind and our body think that we are in serious danger, that something is going to hurt us. And I'm going to assume that vast majority of people kind of know the fight, flight, freeze response in our nervous system. So our brain perceives a threat or that we're in danger, and all of our energy and all of our brain power goes into preparing us to either run, so flight, fight the threat, so fight, or we freeze. And sometimes that can be like disassociating from the outside where we go into ourselves. And so this response, the flight, fight, freeze response, is the result of the most bottom part of our brain, which is at the back here, just before our neck, called the brain stem. And this is the survival brain. And it has one simple job. As you can imagine, it is to survive. It is to stay alive. And so when that brain kicks in, that part of the brain kicks in when we're distressed, the emotion brain, the thinking brain have tapped out. They're gone. And so when a child is distressed, nothing else matters apart from protecting themselves, trying to stay safe. And that might look like being able to get away from the situation or person. So like absconding, or if they're perceiving something as a threat, they might attack. They might attack the person or start destroying things. Or another instance, so that kind of more like the freeze response is they might go completely into themselves and they don't really respond to what people are saying, what they're hearing. They're disassociating. That's when we're distressed. So they're kind of the three parts of the brain that play a role in regulation. And I said I'd come back to the front part of the brain, our thinking brain. Another one of its jobs, on top of everything else that we discussed about, it also has to hold space, monitor the other two parts of the brain, the emotion brain and the survival brain. So it's constantly checking itself. How am I feeling? Am I in danger? And responding to that, which is a lot. Like that's a lot.
That's
For a
interesting.
process.
Yeah. I
And
never actually think about a part of the brain as such looking after what the other bits are up to, and probably very often misinterpreting signals as well.
yeah. And so when we think about we're trying to teach kids to self-regulate, all of those parts of the brain, all of its jobs, we're expecting a child to be able to do that. But their brain hasn't finished developing. It's impossible.
It's so helpful to hear this breakdown. I will say my daughter is in kindy, and at their school, I don't know if it's a specific program or a book or something, but they have actually been learning a version of this. And so she came home talking about, I just said something random about, I remembered something. She said, "Oh, it's your elephant brain." And so they're learning about the parts of the brain and what they do, and then obviously relating it to animals. But I thought that is so cool. So these 5 and 6-year-olds are learning this really meta understanding about how they exist.
Yeah.
That'd be useful, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to extend on that, it really should be also educating the parents.
Correct. And that's what we're here for today here. But I would love, maybe school will do that. In fact, tomorrow, as we're recording, is when we actually have parent-teacher interviews. So there's my little note to self, is to actually ask the teacher, where are these resources coming from? Because
Absolutely.
that would be so powerful to keep that connection going, between school and home. I'm not saying the school's not doing a good job of communication. They're doing great. They're doing their best. But whatever this is, there's some really good resources. And I will say, we're going to talk about some of your resources as well that you're putting out, which are going to be so, so useful. How good for us to just be talking about this and then to include the kids in the conversation. I'm so hopeful for these kids.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, I work in a lot of schools too. They have, what do they call it? Uh, a program project
Mhm.
across the entire school about, I know like it's a lot to do with like mindfulness and knowing what you need.
Mhm.
Forget what they actually call it's like something project. I actually forget the name, but like being able to, coming from that mental health regulation, nervous system regulation point of view, having that as a daily thing to check in is absolutely incredible. Like that is what we need.
Yes. I mean, I'm thinking, what's the closest I got? I got like Healthy Harold, which I think he's still hanging around, that cute giraffe, or kind of creepy giraffe. But that was Healthy Body. It really was just Healthy Body. I don't think there was any mental health there. And I'm pretty sure Healthy Harold these days does talk about mental health.
Yeah,
But,
I don't even recall anything growing up, to be honest.
yeah, okay.
I definitely not embarrassed though.
Yeah. There's cool stuff happening and you are part of it, which is awesome. So let's think about parents. Like, a lot of people listening either are parents of neurodivergent kids, and a lot of people are professionals who are working with families. What what can we do? What can we as professionals do as we're connecting with families, caregivers, parents? Um, what's the best that we can do to support them around this regulation and co-regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as professionals, we have such a huge role to play, and we're working with probably the most vulnerable families who really need that support. And it can be really tricky to navigate. Like it's overwhelming as a health professional. Imagine how families feel when we talk about regulation. So, I'm going to chat about parent education, simplifying how you address regulation with kids and families as a professional. And I'm going to talk a little bit about tools versus strategies as well. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is educate and coach parents that we work with, helping parents to realize and understand what's actually happening for their kids on the level that their kids actually have no control over it. So when we've got that thinking brain or survival brain switched on, the kids don't actually have control over that. And it can be really eye-opening for parents to realize that they're not doing it on purpose. It's not a choice. It is something that is naturally happening, but maybe just for some neurodivergent brains, it's probably more sensitive
I
to
feel like we
certain.
just need to just sit on that for a moment and just all remember, which, I don't know, this is like our frontal cortex in the moment needs to remind ourselves of this fact. This is not a choice. A kid is not choosing to not listen or to act up, or, so, so important.
Yeah. And so I do really enjoy a good parent coaching session. And I love educating people. Always have, always just sharing my knowledge and being able to connect on that level. But what I often do with parents is I sit down with them and we analyze just one specific example of dysregulation that they've had with their child, and getting parents really curious about what's happening for their kid in the moment, but as well, what has led to that up to that point in time. So across the day or morning or whatever it may be. And so choosing just one activity or maybe just one part of a kid's routine to focus on first can be a really helpful way for us professionals to address regulation goals. Otherwise, if we're trying to address regulation across an entire day, like there are too many things happening, there's too many people involved, too many sensory experiences, there's too many environmental things to consider. Are they at school? Is it at home? It's really unrealistic, isn't it? We're not going to achieve those goals if we're thinking about it across an entire day. And it's overwhelming, even for professionals. Like, that's overwhelming. But if we can focus on just one thing, so it might be like, okay, my child struggles getting in the car in the morning to go to school. Or when we come home after school, they just seem to kind of explode. So focusing on just one thing to support and build the skills with the family, so the parents and the child, it's going to allow us to then transfer and generalize those skills to other activities and other times of day. And it's going to be less demand on the parent as well. So if we're like, oh, try deep pressure when they're angry. Well, that can happen at any point in time, can't it? And it's like constantly in the back of their minds, are they angry? Do I need to be doing this now? Like, when do I do it? Like, am I doing it right? Whereas if we know, okay, when they get home after school, we're going to do these activities, these deep pressure activities, these sensory calming activities, it's kind of gives a little bit more scaffolding and it's not so overwhelming. And the parents aren't constantly thinking, oh, are they feeling angry or frustrated? Do I need to start implementing something? So
So
simplify.
part of it is getting so specific to the challenge that then you go, okay, here's one solution. And that often can, or a thing to try. And that problem solving can then apply to many other situations. So you're skill building, but with one very specific starting point. And it's proactive as well. It's like these things aren't going to hurt a kid. If a kid didn't need deep pressure as much, but they don't mind it, that's cool. But if they need it, it's going to be helpful, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And and so that's what I try and do is get really, really specific. And like when we write goals, they should also be specific as well. So to an actual example. Another thing I like to clarify, particularly with families, is tools versus strategies. And these get used interchangeably as well, which is fine, but I view them quite differently. And so the way that I say it is tools are materialistic things. They're fidgets. Got my fidgets on my table, but fidgets. And then you've got strategies, and strategies are, you know, methods or processes or ideas that we kind of implement. So, deep breathing, it's a kind of a process or a method that we implement. And so often I see way too much weight put onto tools. So there's a heavy reliance on tools. And so it will be like adults being like, oh, you're angry, here's your fidgets. And then expecting the child to instantly be calmer and know how to use it. No, doesn't work like that. Where's the co-regulation? And
Can you sit with me and fidget with your fidget while I fidget with mine? Or can we do it together or any of that?
there's no connection. It's like, here you go, use this. That's and again, it comes back to when we think about which brains are currently activated. So if it's now emotion brain, it can't think and process and problem solve. That child's emotion brain needs an adult to help it. So and that's why co-regulation is really important. And that's why it's important that we have a good variety of tools, so maybe some physical things and strategies. And especially because we can't always access our tools. So I hear a lot, showers and baths are really relaxing. When we're at the community, we don't have access to a shower, shower being a tool. So then what are some strategies when we're out and about can we implement? The other thing when we talk about tools and strategies is when we implement them. So is it proactive or reactive? So if we implement something ahead of time to maintain kind of what you were saying before, to maintain regulation, or when a child starts to become a bit dysregulated, that's being proactive. Reactive strategies are when it's kind of almost too late. So we're doing it after the fact. They are dysregulated. They are having a really big feeling right now. What can I do? So, and it's important to know because some tools and strategies will work at better times than others. So like, deep breathing probably isn't going to work when we're with our emotion or survival brain. It's not going to work. It's kind of almost gone, too far past the point. Breathing exercises to rely quite heavily on our front brain, on our thinking brain, because everyone kind of implements it a little bit different, but you have to breathe in a certain amount of time, hold it, breathe it out a certain amount of time. Am I breathing into my mouth, my nose, which part? Is it quick? Is it slow?
Is it flower breathing, square breathing, any of it? Like what are the rules?
Yeah, like I know when I do deep breathing exercises, I have to really concentrate. It's hard for my brain to focus on it. So if I'm doing that if I'm like heavily in my emotion brain, like my emotion brain has well and truly taken over, it's probably not going to work. I probably don't have the attention and the ability to attend to breathing in that moment, let alone in my survival brain. I'm gone. It's not going to happen if my survival brain is there. It just wants to escape. So those are some things that professionals can do to support regulation with families coming from a more co-regulation model, because we're kind of targeting parents when we talk about co-regulation. I'll jump into the next step of that, phase of that, I suppose, is what can parents do to help their kids regulate? And, I'll talk a bit more about co-regulation. So co-regulation is when we have more than one person involved in maintaining a state that's just right for whatever we're doing. So a co-regulator could be your husband or a friend. And for kids, normally that's their grandparent, their mum, their dad, sometimes health professional. We're co-regulators. We're helping regulate in the moment. And co-regulation is what a child's regulation is based on. It's what their development stems from, because a caregiver's regulation is the very first exposure a child has to what regulation is.
So this is the teaching, isn't it? The modeling and living it together.
Yep. So it can be a hard pill to swallow for some parents that whatever you do, however you regulate, your child is watching. They are listening. They are taking that in. And their regulation is going to be based on that, whatever they're being exposed to. And so that's why parents need to address their own regulation needs. Because if the parent isn't regulated, how are you going to help your kid? So, being able to address your own sensory needs and your own bodily needs, your emotions, if you need some connection from a partner or a friend, you still need to look after yourself. And it's really, really important. And it's a good opportunity for kids to see you do strategies. Don't feel like you have to hide it, or I have to hide that I'm angry. I'm going to go step into the other room while I scream into my pillow. If you have some strategies that are really good and work for you, it's okay for your kid to see that. It's okay for you to say, I'm really angry at what you did. I need 5 seconds to go have a sip of my coffee or something. I just need to calm down. It's okay to show that, because that's like connecting. That's you being authentic. You're not hiding yourself from your kid. And they're like, oh, this is something I can do when I'm angry. I can tell mum I need 5 minutes to go have a favorite snack or something. So it's like that role modeling. And these are the type of things I address quite a lot in my program, Charge Your Mind, because co-regulation is so important. And it's something that not really any other regulation programs address. They all target the kid. The kid has to learn this, they have to develop their skills in this. But there's no parent component. There's no, well, what's mum and dad doing? What they're stuck too. It's not just the kid that's stuck. Mum and dad need help as well.
Powerful and so needed. I think I will need your Charge Your Mind program. I do. And I'm going to offer a story here. It's very raw because it was yesterday. And what I want to share here is that it highlights what you were saying. And I hope that it also shares the point that I'm sure you agree with, which is none of this is to say that any of us parents should have any kind of self-judgment or guilt when we get it wrong, because we are going to get it wrong because we are human. I'm going to admit I got it wrong. And then it's the repair of that, I think, that really matters. I'm giving myself grace here. I hope that's correct. But what happened was, so my big kid is nearly 6. My little kid is 1.5, and they get on so well. They love each other and it's gorgeous. But there's also kid-like exuberance that gets in the way sometimes of things going well. And so little kid, they love stealing my water bottle. It's their favorite thing. So whatever I've decided is my water bottle that day, and I have a few, it's theirs. So whatever. And it was quite a heavy one, and little one was holding it, drinking from it. Big kid got really excited about something else, physically just was not in control of that moment. Kind of either grabbed it, reached for it, or did a movement, whatever. She caused the water bottle to fall on little one's toe. And that's a heavy water bottle. Now, in that moment, I was really worried because I knew that would be a big owie. So I got angry and I said, so I'm trying to think what I even said to my big kid. I'm really not proud of this, but I'm gonna say it. I teach this stuff all the time, and I get it wrong. And I got really high arousal, and I just said something like, I told you not to grab it. Now she's hurt her toe, something like that. I just got really I'm so unproud of what I did. And then I said she needs an ice pack, and big kid, sad and remorseful, went and got the ice pack and brought it over, and then went off and got very sad on her own. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh, what about that? So I was a little kid, ice pack on toe. She was okay. She was actually okay. Toe was fine. And then I went and addressed myself and I went, oh, okay. I just had a huge angry response. None of it was her fault. I put her into shame now because she's thinking that she did something wrong. Anyway, so we repaired. And we have a lot of very, very open discussions about emotions. Partly it's, the speechy and me coming through into my mum role, very much. And so we talked about it. And one of the things we talked about was one thing she's working on is giving people a little bit more space. And that was kind of how it all got triggered in the first place. It was part of a thing she's practicing that's hard for her. And I said, a thing I'm practicing that's hard for me is sometimes I get really angry really quickly, but actually it's because I'm worried and then I don't control that. And then I just say things in an angry way. And she said, yeah. And I said, I need to practice that. And she said, yeah. There's my story.
But like,
This is my therapy session, Cheri.
But like for you to like reflect on that, for you to be like, to identify kind of what your response is in a moment of stress, like that's huge. That's like a huge self-awareness step. And something that my program kind of talks about is what caregivers regulation style is based on how a caregiver, what their regulation is in a moment of dysregulation. It's like a questionnaire and you get allocated a type of animal.
I really want to do this. This is I need this. You can hear it. I need it. Like I teach it, I live it, I think it, and I struggle with it sometimes because this is hard stuff. This is we're always going to be working on it, aren't we?
Yeah. And so your regulation, but it also the other factor that it takes into account is your response to moments of dysregulation. We have a therapy dog, an ostrich, a bear, and a kangaroo. So there are 4 parent regulation styles. I won't talk too much about them. You'll have to follow along with my program if you want to know more about it.
I will, and I will be sharing links in the show notes as well, so anyone can go and check it out.
But yeah, it's really important to be able to know what your default setting is. So how do you look after your regulation in the moment of stress or when dysregulation is occurring for you or someone else? And what is your response to other people or your child, for example? And that's like some really deep thinking. And, you have to be very honest with yourself because I feel like a lot of parents do feel shame and guilt when they do the questionnaire and when they think about it. Some of them don't really want to share it with me. I'm like, totally judgment-free. So you're only human and you can't get it right all the time.
And I hope that me sharing that, like that was my very specific choice. I was like, do I say it? Do I not say it? I know that a lot of people like listening to this, but because I want everyone to know, like we all mess it up sometimes. That and putting the shame, yeah, I'm feeling a little bit of it, but I'm also just moving through it. We just have it, and then we what do we do next? Let's go.
Yeah, absolutely. And like having that real open, honest discussion with your big kid, which is like fantastic because it's not like you're ignoring it. It's not like you are accepting it and moving on. You just have to push through it. It's very much like, okay. And it's like that repair stage, isn't it? Like, this is what's happened. I didn't mean it. It's because it came from this other feeling I was having. I was angry because I was worried, which is like a huge thing to have that reflection and that ability to reflect.
It's so obviously very raw for me, but at the same time, it's so important. This is the work. We are all doing the work. And I think then professionals, whether you're parents or not, and if you are a parent yourself and a professional, there might be extra layers of challenge because things that you experience in your home or things that sort of show up with your own parenting might come into play in your professional role. That can be an interesting layer to just examine, I think. Not ignore, just notice. But what do you think, what can professionals do when they're supporting kids in the moment in their therapy sessions? Let's say things escalate, challenging behaviors, tricky, distress behaviors come out. What can professionals do to regulate or co-regulate?
Yeah, I think checking in with yourself is definitely really important and making sure that you can cope with the situation. Because remember, whatever you do is going to impact that relationship and that rapport that you have with the child. So first things first, do you have the capacity to help right now? It's really important to know what your limits are. And that if need be, it is okay to end your session early. It is okay to say, I am not coping, the child's not coping, we're going to finish.
I'm just clapping here. Like, I've got to just say it because some people will be listening, not watching. Wow. And it's on so many layers, isn't it? It's that advocacy, the modeling of advocacy, the modeling of that reflective approach.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And like I've done it several times. It's just gotten to a point where I no longer can help. And I'm starting to get dysregulated myself and being like, we're going to have to finish. You need to kind of rebalance. The child needs to rebalance. Because as professionals, like, but we're human as well. We have our own needs. And especially if we're neurodivergent, we have to take a little bit more extra care of looking after ourselves. We have maybe some sensory sensitivities on top of it. So we've got a child screaming and yelling. It might be way too much for us to handle. It's also really important to know what's dysregulation and what's distress. So is the child dysregulated or is it distress? If it's distress, so when their survival brain is kicking in, that child needs safety. That probably means they need to leave. They are trying to fight you. They're trying to run away, so flight, or they might be just completely disassociating. So they probably need to go home, or they may need mum or dad, or maybe they need the iPad, whatever they need to feel safe. And it's important to know that if they're distressed as a health professional, it is not a time to introduce regulation strategies because that survival brain does not care. It is just trying to stay alive.
Mm-hmm. Can I just take a little sidebar? Total interruptive sidebar, which is just, you mentioned the iPad. I don't want to move on from it too quick because it's so important to notice. In many cases, whether it's in the home or, it can be in professional settings too, the removal of a device could be a punishment for bad behavior. And that is the total antithesis of how we're saying this, air quotes, bad behavior. This bad behavior is complete, out of control, not the child's fault, distress or dysregulation. And sometimes for some kids in some settings, that time on the device is the one thing that they would have needed to actually regulate.
Yeah. And screen time is a whole bucket of information itself.
Maybe we talk about that another time because that's a big
I need to because it is its whole thing when we talk about screen time, and there's a lot of different opinions out there in screen time, and a lot of people are very loud about it, which can be hard for neurodivergent, kids and that, because their brains work differently, so they process screens differently. It may not be the same as other kids.
Sorry, I completely sidebarred you, but it is such important point. I think we need to revisit this. Sorry. So you were saying, we need to sometimes just stop. It's not the time to teach strategies. It's not the time to keep the session going sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, recognizing when it's distress. If they're dysregulated, dysregulation can be on different levels. It's not as clear cut as dysregulated and then distress. Like dysregulation kind of builds up. There are going to be some strategies that work better than others. But in all instances, if they are dysregulated, reducing the demands, so kind of removing any pressure on them, reducing your language and questions, because remember, our emotion brain is kicked in. So the inside part of our brain is kicked in. Our thinking brain can't comprehend and answer questions. And it's okay to just sit there with them, as long as if you're there, as long as if you're present and you're there for when they need you. And you might sit there and maybe if they're not too dysregulated, you might role model some strategies and tools that they are familiar with, that you've already practiced and worked on when they're being regulated. So again, not introducing anything new and no demand that they have to do it. It's just you there present, role modeling, co-regulating. And, I did this the other day. It was a telehealth session and I had one of my kiddos after school, complete meltdown. And I sat there as they had their meltdown for about 5-10 minutes. I was just there, ready for when they were. And when they were ready, we worked out that they were hungry. And I was like, I think maybe we should have a snack. Maybe we can have a snack before we do anything else.
So powerful. I have a question for you.
Yep.
A very like your personal moment in that. How did you feel while you were sitting there next to that dysregulated child? And what did you do for yourself in that moment?
Yeah. So I guess a little bit different because it was online. So it was a telehealth session. So
You can mute.
we didn't mute, but
Just saying it's available. You can turn the volume down. Go on, keep going.
I think, it did offer me some of that space that perhaps I could have needed. End of the day, everyone's tired. Kids and me, we're tired. Um, but also I know my clients really, really well, and I knew, okay, one of these basic needs isn't being met, and I knew that. And so I just had to wait until that it was a time that emotion brain was slowing down and the thinking brain was kicking back in again, um, for us to figure out, okay, what's actually happening. Because if I had have asked, actually, I'm pretty sure actually I did ask when the emotion brain was kicked in, oh, are you hungry? I'm pretty sure I got a very loud, screamy, no, I'm not, but they were. And I had an inkling that they were. Wasn't the time to ask the question, but that's okay. I waited, I sat with them. I was there when they were ready for me. And when they were there ready for me, I think I'm hungry. Yeah, that's okay.
I think I'm just noticing as well this thought popping up. It's like if the child is a PDA, even more so like that moment where we, the outside people, suggest a strategy or an idea for them to try, it's going to be a like, no, that's a terrible idea. But letting them figure it out when they're ready to will be like, oh, okay, I'll do the thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And definitely for like PDA kids, that need that autonomy and that drive for autonomy. Yeah. And so it can be just powerful just sitting there and just for them to know, I'm here, I'm ready, I see you, I hear you. What do you need from me? It can be so powerful. And it feels can we feel a bit odd at first because like you feel like you're sitting there not doing anything and you might be panicking. Oh my God, like what do I do? But it's okay to just sit there with them in the moment. It's okay.
And I feel like this is where the connection with the parents and, really sharing the strategies. And maybe, I don't know what you did in that moment, but when I've had similar cases like come up with telehealth version of it, I've been able to text the parent, just a little subtle text to go, this is what I'm doing and why. A little bit harder when you're in a room in the moment together to kind of do that, but it's possible. But even if it's that longer term relationship where there's an understanding that, when this happens, this is what we're going to do. I think earlier career professionals struggle. And I've seen this come up where it comes to this question of like, oh, but the parent might think I'm just playing with a child as another way it shows up where they think, oh, but the parent judging me for not doing work. Like the sitting while there's a meltdown, they might be judged for not doing work, but that's not the whole picture.
Yeah, there's so much more going on. And I think sometimes too, addressing stuff like that in the moment, it's not the right time. You've also got the kid there. Do they actually need to be listening to what you're explaining? Like, I'm sure that like if someone did that to us, they're like, I'm sitting right here. Why are you talking to me as if I'm not here?
Yeah.
So
And I feel like as well, service delivery, service model question is, this is why I so strongly advocate, and I know you do this, is for like just parent sessions or, at least communication, but actually having sessions sometimes just with the caregivers or just with the adults around the child. It's so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, even being like to the parent at the end of the session, oh, I'm going to flick you a bit of an email just about today. So just keep your eye on the email tonight. And then explain it in the email then, or, and then offer, would you like to discuss that further? Or do you feel like this is something you need more support with? And it's hard though.
Right.
You always have to justify yourself. Like, it's hard. There's a lot of social pressure on us as professionals. So give yourself grace. You are human. Sometimes we make mistakes. That's fine. But yeah, it can be hard for us as well. And I think sometimes parents forget that.
I feel like that's where also longer term relationships are so powerful. We can't always have them, and there's so many reasons why. But when you have this therapeutic relationship that goes over a while, just the same as you build that connection with the kid, it's you build that connection with the family, that shared understanding. You feel less likely to submit to that that sense of pressure, whether it's real or imagined or perceived or, a worry comes from a worry maybe. It's so important to just be really clear about the how you work, the why you work before the session, during, where it's appropriate, after. The scripts you gave are really helpful, I think, like how you actually communicate that with families.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Is there anything else that we haven't really touched on around the service level of how we can support the regulation of kids and the co-regulation?
Yeah. So kind of that bigger level thinking. So structuring your schedules, your days, your weeks, that type of thing. And that's really hard to have that discussion with your employer. Especially new grads. I know new grads sometimes can feel like they don't have that voice yet. Like who am I to say that I can't, have my schedule like that because I'm only new. I've never tried it before. So it's really important to be true to yourself and be like, actually, I am struggling with these certain clients or something. It's okay to get help. You know, people don't know unless you tell them. Um, and that happened to me as a new grad, especially being a people pleaser. I pushed through things when they could have happened differently. So just a simple scheduling change. So not having certain clients back to back and that type of thing. And so when I became a team leader in one of my other jobs, one of the things I did do was implement a bit of a traffic light system where therapists gave a color to their clients. And so it was completely up to the therapist to assign those colors. So I wasn't telling them, oh no, that's a hard client or that's an easy client, because every therapist is different strengths, different areas for growth. So every therapist did it themselves. And that allowed us to look at their calendar on a daily, weekly, fortnightly basis. So, and in general, so like, oh man, you have like half the clients you've marked as like red. Like, if that's the case, you're going to burn out. You are going to hit a point where you can't cope anymore. So being able to have a nice mix of clients that a therapist finds are probably a little bit more straightforward, a little bit more easier. I don't know what other term to use, but easier. As well as some that is challenging as well, because we still need to learn and grow.
I think that's so important. It's the permission to self-advocate, because if you yourself are not okay, well, let's just say okay to be an umbrella term for all these kinds of regulation we've been talking about, you will not do a great job for your clients. And so if that means dropping down a day or shifting the spread of your client hours to do, less each day or have a bigger break, whatever that is, like talking to your employer, if you are employed or if you're self-employed, do this for yourself. It's essential. And if the employer does not understand what you're asking for or open up that conversation, you need to find a new job. That's a hard truth, but you will burn out, right? We've seen it.
Yep.
We've probably lived it.
Sure. And yeah, and I had the luxury of being able to chop and change what my schedule looked like and to find my just right. And I've now been sitting with that for quite a few years because I had the luxury of an employer of they were super flexible and allowed me to had my calendar however I wanted. And so because of that, I was able to find the right fit for me. And so I think it's really important for, managers, team leaders, and businesses to be flexible for their staff. If someone says that they want to do, extra clients on that day, give them the benefit of the doubt that they know themselves best. You don't know them. You don't know how they experience things. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay, they are the expert on themselves. They're allowed to do that. And if it doesn't work, change it. It's not that big of a deal. It might be a pain to reschedule some people, but in the long run, how else are you going to know if it works unless you try?
And what's the bigger pain? Like you yourself, the grown-up, having a meltdown, or, just having a few back and forths to fix up the calendar?
Or even like emergency leave because you burnt out and you have to take 3 weeks off.
Yes. Yeah.
As a manager, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to try something that may or may not work, or that your employee is probably going to be burnt out in a month's time, and who knows, they may even leave that job because the expectations you're placing on them are unrealistic.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, I'm going to just throw in a shameless plug for my other business here is that if you're self-employed and you're neurodivergent and you're struggling to figure out what this is supposed to look like for you, this is exactly what I do in neurodivergent business coaching and consulting. Honestly, we've shifted from, it's still the same topic though, we've shifted from the regulation for kids to going, it's the same concepts for us grown-ups. And we're zooming out to like, how do we ensure that we ourselves are okay? And that is so important. It's the same concepts, but we just have to apply it in our grown-up world. So if I can help you on a business level, I'm going to pop my own link into the show notes. And before we wrap up with Cherry, because I know we could just keep going. So first thing I'm going to put it out there is if anyone has any thread of what we've talked about today and you want us to go and chat about it more, just send me an email and we can do it.
Completely. I'd love to.
If you want to. I just think there's so many different directions we could go. Is there anything that we've missed or anything you want to highlight or re-highlight around the ideas of regulation, co-regulation, and especially please do share the resources that you're creating and you've been creating that are just so flippin' useful. I can't wait to get my head into it because I clearly need it. What else can we do to keep this learning going?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many great resources out there, a few different books and things. The Whole Brain Child is one that I often recommend to families. If you've got the time and space to read a full book. Yeah. I do have resources also on my website. So I've got one called Regulation Rescue. So it gives a bit of a step-by-step process of what to do in terms of dysregulation. So really simple, free.
All of these links are going to be in the show notes. Keep going. What else have you got?
And I've also got some different groups. So I do run some parent groups as well. So talking a lot about what we've talked about today. Also have a lot from my program, Charge Your Mind. So I'm one of the co-developers. It's not just me. Hannah is my co-developer. So Charge Your Mind, if all has gone to plan, will be available by the time this podcast comes out. So fingers crossed it is.
I hope so. And that's going to be, I'll say that's like kind of end of April-ish. And regardless whether it's fully ready or not, we're going to have a link in the show notes and you can go and learn more. And, whether it's fully ready or just on the cusp of being launched, the info will be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first stage is called Battery Bootcamp. And so it is directly targeted at parents and caregivers. And it is a workbook and resources that covers everything, covers regulation development, your own regulation style, how to support your own regulation, and the beginnings of supporting a child's regulation. So noticing their triggers and their signs. It's also a really good one for health professionals to use with families for coaching and education sessions as well. So parents can use it on their own or health professionals can implement it with families. And then we've got other stages coming out as well, which is super exciting.
There's some incredible, I know I've seen some of your resources. I've got some. I love watching what you're creating and thinking. And this chat has been so clarifying for me. I'm going to have to think more on it. And I can't wait when I go back and listen back and edit it again. I'm actually really, really excited.
Yeah, it's huge. And it's probably like a complete information overload. So please do reach out if anyone has any questions or there's something that didn't quite make sense, whatever that may be, because it is a lot and it's a lot to unpack. And that's what I was saying at the very start. It's not as straightforward as people think it is.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, definitely get in touch with Cheri. She is Learn and Grow OT. You don't have to remember anything. It's all going to be linked up in the show notes, but on Instagram, go straight away if you are there and go follow her. She is learn.grow.ot. And so, I'm so excited. There's so much more that we can all do on this ongoing journey. I love it. I appreciate this space. I really that I've got so much to sit with. And I can't wait to hear what anyone listening or watching has, what's popped up for you. What are your next questions? And maybe they'll turn into another episode or a resource.
Absolutely. Yeah. If there was something that you want me to dive more in depth with or anything like that, would love your thoughts.
Yay. Thanks so much for coming on, Cheri.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this space and time with me. Thank you for being open to learning and unlearning and to listening to the perspectives and experiences of neurodivergent folks. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend, share a screenshot on Instagram, pop a 5-star rating and a review in your favourite app, and join me on Instagram and Facebook. I'm at play.learn.chat. Have a spectacular day.